Rain lashed the city in wild, relentless sheets, turning the midnight streets into rivers of silver and shadow. Leela's breath came in ragged bursts as she darted through the maze of alleyways, her soaked sneakers slapping against the pavement. Every heartbeat thundered in her ears, louder than the storm, louder than the distant sirens that seemed to chase her through the darkness. She clutched her bag to her chest, knuckles white, the contents inside more precious than gold, more dangerous than she'd ever imagined. She didn't dare look back. The memory of those cold, predatory eyes in the alley haunted her, urging her forward, faster, deeper into the unknown. Her phone was dead, her map a soggy blur. All she had was the address scrawled on her palm, ink bleeding in the rain. She was supposed to find safety here, somewhere in this labyrinth of old money and older secrets. A flash of lightning revealed a mansion looming at the end of the street, its iron gates yawning open as if an invitation. The house was a relic from another era, tall, proud, and shrouded in ivy, its windows glowing faintly against the storm. Lila hesitated, heart hammering, but the wind howled behind her, driving her forward. She slipped through the gates, her footsteps muffled by the sodden gravel. The front door stood before her, massive and carved with strange, twisting patterns. She reached for the knocker, but before her hand could touch it, the door creaked open on its own, swinging inward with a slow, deliberate groan. The warm light inside spilled out onto the porch, golden and inviting, a stark contrast to the cold, merciless night. Lila's breath caught. She stepped inside, the air thick with the scent of old wood, leather, and something darker, something wild. The door closed behind her with a soft click, sealing her fate. She stood dripping on the marble floor, her reflection fractured in the polished surface. The silence pressed in, heavy and expectant. She called out, her voice trembling, but only her echo answered. The mansion's grandeur was overwhelming. Velvet drapes, gilded mirrors, a sweeping staircase that vanished into shadow. Every detail whispered of power and secrets, of lives lived in the half-light. Lila shivered, acutely aware of her own smallness, her vulnerability laid bare in this place of opulence and danger. Somewhere above, a floorboard creaked. She froze, pulse racing. Was it the wind or someone watching her from the shadows? The sense of being observed prickled along her skin, raising goosebumps. She wasn't alone. She could feel it, a presence patient and unseen, waiting just beyond the edge of the light. She took a hesitant step forward, drawn deeper into the mansion's heart, unable to shake the feeling that she had crossed a threshold from which there would be no easy return. And as the storm raged outside, Lila realized that whatever she was running from might pale in comparison to what she had just walked into. But she couldn't turn back now. Not when every instinct screamed that her story was only beginning, and someone, somewhere in this house, was waiting for her to take the next step. Lila's footsteps echoed through the cavernous foyer, each one a hesitant question in the hush that blanketed the mansion. The storm outside battered the windows, but inside, the world was muffled, as if the house itself was holding its breath. She moved deeper, drawn by the flicker of candlelight down a long, velvet-lined corridor. Her wet clothes clung to her skin, and every nerve was alive with warning. She should leave, she told herself. She should run, but the door behind her had vanished into the shadows, and the only way out seemed to be forward. She passed portraits whose painted eyes seemed to follow her, their gilded frames catching the light in ways that made her shiver. The silence was thick, broken only by the distant ticking of a grandfather clock and the soft drip of rainwater from her hair onto the marble floor. Lila's heart hammered as she reached the end of the hall, where a grand staircase spiraled upward into darkness. She hesitated, her hand brushing the banister, when a sudden chill swept over her, raising the fine hairs on her arms. "Hello?" she called, her voice barely more than a whisper. It sounded small, swallowed by the vastness of the house. No answer came, only the echo of her own uncertainty. She took a step up, then another, the old wood creaking beneath her weight. The air grew colder, the shadows deeper, as if the house itself was closing in around her. Halfway up the stairs she paused, sensing movement, a flicker at the edge of her vision. She spun but saw nothing. Her breath fogged in the air, and she realized she was trembling, not just from the cold, but from something else. Anticipation, dread, a strange sense of inevitability. She pressed on, drawn by a force she couldn't name. At the top of the stairs, a corridor stretched before her, lined with closed doors. She reached for the nearest handle, but before she could touch it, a voice slipped from the darkness behind her, low, smooth, and impossibly close. "I've been waiting for you." Lila froze, every muscle locked in place. The voice was deep, magnetic, threaded with a confidence that sent a jolt of fear through her. Yet beneath the terror, something else stirred. A flicker of recognition, as if she'd heard that voice before, perhaps in a dream or a memory she couldn't quite grasp. She turned slowly, searching the shadows. "Who's there?" she demanded, her voice steadier than she felt. A figure emerged from the gloom, tall and broad-shouldered, his features obscured by the dim light. He moved with a predator's grace, each step deliberate, unhurried. Lila's pulse raced as he stopped just out of reach, his presence filling the hallway. "You shouldn't be here," she said, forcing herself to meet his gaze, though she could barely make out his eyes. I thought this was a safe house. I must have made a mistake." He smiled, a slow, knowing curve of his lips. "There are no mistakes, Lila. Not tonight." The sound of her name on his tongue sent a shiver down her spine. How did he know her? She took a step back, but he didn't follow. Instead, he watched her with a calm intensity, as if he could see straight through her defenses. "Why are you waiting for me?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. He tilted his head, studying her. "Because you belong here, whether you realize it or not. You've crossed a line, and now there's no going back." His words wrapped around her like velvet and steel, both a promise and a threat. Lila's fear warred with a strange magnetic pull. She should be terrified, but she couldn't look away. The man's confidence was absolute, his presence overwhelming, and yet there was something in his voice that felt achingly familiar, as if he'd been haunting her steps long before this night. The storm outside intensified, thunder rattling the windows, but inside, the world narrowed to the space between them. Lila's mind raced with questions. Who was he? How did he know her name? And why did it feel like her entire life had been leading to this moment? Before she could speak again, he stepped closer, his eyes finally catching the light. Dark, intense, and inhumanly sharp. "You're not safe here, Lila, but you're safer with me than anywhere else." The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning, as the shadows seemed to close in around them, promising answers and dangers just beyond the next door. Lila's breath caught as the man stepped fully into the light, his features finally revealed. He was striking, dark hair swept back from a strong brow, eyes the color of midnight, and a jaw set with the kind of confidence that came from a lifetime of command. His suit was immaculate, but there was something untamed about him, a wildness that flickered just beneath the surface. He looked like he belonged in this mansion, as much a part of its history as the ancient portraits on the walls. She took a step back, her instincts screaming at her to run, but he moved with a predator's grace, blocking her path with a single effortless motion. He didn't touch her, but the space between them crackled with tension. Lila's heart hammered in her chest, but she forced herself to meet his gaze, refusing to show fear. "Who are you?" she demanded, her voice sharp despite the tremor she couldn't quite hide. He studied her, his eyes narrowing as if he were searching for something in her face. "You don't remember me, do you?" he said, his tone unreadable. "Or perhaps you're just a better actress than I thought." Lila shook her head, confusion warring with fear. "I don't know you. I'm not supposed to be here. I made a mistake. Please, just let me go." He smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Mistakes have consequences, Lila, especially in my world." She bristled at his words, anger flaring in her chest. "I don't care about your world. I just want to leave." He stepped closer, his presence overwhelming. "You walked into my house at midnight, uninvited. That's not something I can ignore." Lila's fist clenched at her sides. "I thought this was a safe house. I was running from someone." He cut her off with a raised hand. "Everyone who comes here is running from something. The question is, what are you running toward?" His words unsettled her, striking too close to truth she wasn't ready to face. She tried to sidestep him, but he moved again, effortlessly blocking her escape. The power play was clear. He was in control, and he wanted her to know it. "Let me go," she said, her voice low and fierce. He regarded her for a long moment, then leaned in, his voice dropping to a whisper meant only for her. "You're braver than most, but bravery can get you killed in this house." Lila refused to back down. "I'm not afraid of you." A flicker of amusement crossed his face. "You should be." For a heartbeat, they stood locked in a silent battle of wills. Lila's defiance burned in her eyes, but she couldn't deny the magnetic pull he exerted. There was something about him, something dangerous, yes, but also compelling. She sensed secrets swirling around him. Secrets that might explain why he seemed to know her. Why he spoke as if they shared a history she couldn't remember. He finally stepped back, giving her space, but not freedom. "My name is Dante," he said, his tone softer but no less commanding. "And you're not leaving?" "Not yet." Lila's jaw tightened. "You can't keep me here." He arched a brow, a hint of a smile playing at his lips. "Watch me." She glared at him, frustration and fear warring inside her. "What do you want from me?" Dante's gaze softened, just for a moment, and she saw something flicker in his eyes. Regret, maybe, or longing. "I want answers, and I think you have them, even if you don't realize it yet." Lila shook her head, bewildered. "I don't know what you're talking about." He studied her, as if weighing her words. "Maybe not, but you will." The air between them was electric, charged with questions neither of them dared to ask. Lila's mind raced. Who was this man, really? Why did he act as if he'd been waiting for her? And why did she feel, deep in her bones, that her life had just changed forever? Dante gestured toward the grand staircase. "Come, you're soaked and shivering. I won't harm you, Lila. Not unless you give me a reason." She hesitated, but something in his voice, an undercurrent of sincerity, made her follow. As they ascended the stairs, Lila glanced back at the door, her escape route now blocked by more than just a lock. She was trapped, not by force, but by the web of secrets and danger that Dante spun so effortlessly. At the top of the stairs, he paused, turning to face her. "You have questions. So do I, but tonight you'll stay here. Tomorrow, perhaps, we'll both have answers." Lila's heart pounded as he led her down another shadowy corridor, the mansion's secrets pressing in on all sides. She didn't know what Dante wanted from her, or why he seemed so certain she belonged here. But as the door closed behind them, she realized she was no longer just running from danger. She was running straight into its arms. And somewhere in the darkness, she sensed that this was only the beginning. Dante led Lila down a corridor lined with ancient tapestries and flickering sconces, the air thick with the scent of wax and something wilder, something she couldn't name. Her mind raced with escape plans, but every turn seemed to lead her deeper into the mansion's labyrinth. She tried to memorize the path, but the halls twisted and doubled back on themselves, as if the house itself was conspiring to keep her inside. He stopped before a heavy wooden door, opening it with a key that glinted in the candlelight. The room beyond was unexpectedly warm and inviting. A fire crackled in the hearth, casting golden light over plush chairs and a table set for two. Lila hesitated on the threshold, her instincts screaming that comfort here was just another trap. Dante gestured for her to enter. "Sit. You're safe for now." She stepped inside, wary, her eyes darting to the windows, tall, arched, and barred with ornate ironwork. No easy escape. She perched on the edge of a chair, refusing to relax. Dante poured 2 glasses of deep red wine, sliding one across the table to her. "I don't drink with strangers," she said, her voice tight. He smiled, unbothered. "Then let's not be strangers." He raised his glass, watching her over the rim. To unexpected guests. Lila ignored the wine, her gaze fixed on him. "You said you'd let me go. Prove it. Open the door and I'll disappear. You'll never see me again." Dante set his glass down, his expression unreadable. "You're not a prisoner, Lila, but you are in danger. Whoever chased you here, they won't stop. And this house, for all its secrets, is the safest place you'll find tonight." She bristled, anger flaring. "You don't know anything about me." He leaned forward, his eyes dark and intent. "I know enough. I know you're running from something that terrifies you. I know you're desperate enough to walk into a stranger's home at midnight. And I know you're braver than you think." Lila's hands curled into fists. I don't need your protection. Maybe not, he said softly. But you need time. One night, that's all I ask. Stay until morning and I'll see you safely out. Refuse and you're free to go now. But I won't be responsible for what happens once you step outside these walls. She stared at him, searching for a lie. But his gaze was steady, unwavering. The offer sounded simple, but every instinct warned her there was more at stake than he let on. A log shifted in the fire, sending sparks up the chimney. Shadows danced along the walls, and for a moment, Lila thought she saw something move in the darkness. A pair of eyes, low to the ground, glinting with an unnatural light. She blinked, and they were gone. But the chill that crept up her spine lingered. What's really going on here? She demanded. Why do I feel like I'm being watched? Dante's lips curved in a faint, enigmatic smile. This house has many eyes. Some loyal, some less so. But none will harm you while you're under my protection. She didn't trust him, not fully. But the memory of those eyes, hungry, inhuman, made her hesitate. And if I say no? If I walk out that door right now? He shrugged, but there was steel in his voice. Then you take your chances with the night. With whoever or whatever is hunting you. I won't stop you, but I won't help you either. Lila's mind spun. She wanted to leave, to run as far and as fast as she could. But the storm still raged outside, and the memory of her pursuer's cold gaze haunted her. She weighed her options, feeling the walls close in. Was this a test? Was he trying to break her, to see how much she could take before she snapped? She met his gaze, refusing to flinch. Why do you care what happens to me? Dante's eyes softened just for a moment. Let's just say I have a vested interest in your survival. More than you know. The cryptic answer only deepened her unease. She glanced again at the shadows, half expecting those animal eyes to reappear. Fine, she said at last, her voice steady. I'll stay, but only until morning. He inclined his head, as if she'd passed some invisible test. Wise choice. She pushed the wine away, her appetite gone. What now? Do I just sit here and wait for sunrise? Dante stood, moving to the window. He looked out into the storm, his silhouette framed by lightning. You can rest, or you can ask questions. But know this, every answer comes with a price. Lila's pulse quickened. What kind of price? He turned, his eyes catching the firelight, and for a heartbeat, she saw something wild and ancient flicker there. Truth is never free, Lila, not in this house. The words hung between them, heavy with promise and threat. Lila realized she was no longer just a guest. She was a player in a game she didn't understand, with rules that shifted like shadows. She wondered what would happen if she broke them, if she tried to escape before dawn. Would the eyes in the dark follow her? Would Dante? As the fire crackled and the storm raged, Lila felt the weight of the night settle around her. She was trapped, not by locks or chains, but by the secrets that pressed in from every corner of the mansion. And as Dante watched her, silent and inscrutable, she knew the real danger was only beginning. But she would not be broken. Not tonight. Not by him. Not by the darkness that waited just beyond the light. And somewhere, in the depths of the house, something unseen shifted, watching, waiting, as the game began. The fire's warmth faded as Lila sat alone, the silence of the mansion pressing in on her. Dante had left her with a cryptic promise and a warning, vanishing into the labyrinth of halls with the same quiet authority he'd carried since the moment she arrived. She tried to relax, but her nerves were too raw, her mind too restless. The storm outside had eased to a steady drizzle, but inside, the air felt charged, as if the house itself was waiting for her to make a move. She rose from her chair, curiosity and unease warring inside her. The room was beautiful, but every detail seemed designed to distract, to lull her into a false sense of security. She moved to the bookshelves, running her fingers along the spines. One book was out of place, a slim, leather-bound volume with no title. She pulled it free, and a faint click sounded behind her. A section of the wall slid open, revealing a narrow passageway cloaked in darkness. Lila's heart pounded. She hesitated only a moment before slipping inside, the door closing silently behind her. The air was cooler here, tinged with the scent of stone and secrets. She crept forward, her footsteps muffled by thick carpet, her hand trailing along the wall for balance. The passage twisted and turned, leading her deeper into the mansion's heart. She passed a series of doors, each one locked tight, until she found one slightly ajar. She pushed it open and stepped into a small study, lit by a single lamp. Papers were scattered across the desk, covered in strange symbols and numbers. Lila scanned them, recognizing fragments of Italian and Russian, names she'd only heard whispered in the city's underworld. There were maps, too, with routes marked in red, and a list of names. Some crossed out, others circled. A chill ran through her. This was no ordinary home. This was the nerve center of something vast and dangerous. She pocketed a slip of paper with a string of numbers, unsure why, but certain it mattered. A sudden noise made her freeze. Voices drifted through a vent in the wall, low, urgent, and unmistakably afraid. She's here. The girl. Dante says she's under his protection. A second voice, sharper, replied, "He's risking everything. If the council finds out, he won't let her go. You saw the portrait. She's the spitting image." Lila pressed closer, straining to hear. The first voice dropped to a whisper. "There's a traitor. Someone's been leaking information. If they find her..." The conversation cut off as footsteps approached. Lila ducked behind the desk, heart racing. The door creaked open and two men entered, both dressed in black, their faces tense. "We have to warn him," one muttered. "If she's really the one..." The other shook his head. "He already knows. He always knows." They left as quickly as they'd come, the door clicking shut behind them. Lila waited until their footsteps faded before slipping out of her hiding place. Her mind spun with questions. Who was the woman in the portrait? Why did she look like Lila? And what did it mean to be the one? She crept back into the passage, following it until it opened into a grand gallery. Moonlight spilled through stained glass, illuminating a wall of portraits. Lila's breath caught as she spotted one near the center, a woman in a crimson gown, her hair dark and wild, her eyes fierce and hauntingly familiar. Lila stepped closer, her own reflection merging with the painted face. The resemblance was uncanny. It was like looking into a mirror warped by time. A plaque beneath the portrait read, "Isabella di Rossi, 1892 to 1913, beloved, betrayed, lost." Lila's fingers traced the name. Isabella. The name tugged at something deep inside her, a memory just out of reach. She wondered if this was why Dante had looked at her with such intensity, why the staff seemed to fear her presence as much as they feared him. A soft rustle behind her made her spin. A maid stood in the doorway, her eyes wide with terror. "You shouldn't be here," she whispered, glancing over her shoulder as if expecting someone to appear. "Please, miss, come back to your room. It's not safe to wander." Lila tried to press her for answers, but the maid only shook her head, her hands trembling. "He'll be angry if he finds you here. Please, for your own sake." The woman's fear was palpable, her obedience absolute. Lila followed her back through the winding halls, her mind racing. The staff moved like shadows, eyes averted, their loyalty to Dante unquestioned, but their fear of him, and of her, was even greater. As they passed a closed door, Lila heard muffled voices, Dante's among them, low and commanding. She caught fragments. The council. The traitor. She must be protected at all costs. The words sent a chill through her. She was at the center of something dangerous, something that had been set in motion long before she arrived. Back in her room, Lila paced, piecing together what she'd learned. She wasn't just a random intruder. She was connected to this place, to Dante, and to a history that refused to stay buried. The portrait, the coded messages, the whispered warnings, they all pointed to a truth she was only beginning to grasp. She stared out the window, the rain now a gentle patter against the glass. Somewhere in the mansion, secrets waited to be uncovered, and Lila knew she couldn't rest until she found them. The sense of being watched returned, stronger than before, as if the house itself was urging her onward. But the more she learned, the more dangerous her position became. If there was a traitor in the house, she was a target, and if Dante was right, if she truly belonged here, then her life was about to change in ways she couldn't yet imagine. As the night deepened, Lila resolved to find the answers she needed, no matter the cost. The shadows held secrets, and she was done running from them. She would face whatever waited in the dark, even if it meant confronting the truth about herself and about Dante, that she was most afraid to learn. And as she lay awake, the echo of Isabella's eyes haunted her, a silent promise that the past was not finished with her yet. The mansion was quieter than it had been all night. The storm outside reduced to a distant murmur. Lila sat on the edge of her bed, the slip of coded numbers clutched in her hand, her mind racing with questions she couldn't answer. The portrait of Isabella lingered in her thoughts, its eyes seeming to follow her even here. She was just beginning to drift into uneasy sleep when a sudden, shattering crash jolted her upright. Shouts echoed through the halls, urgent, panicked, and close. The sound of splintering wood and heavy boots thundered from below. Lila's heart leapt into her throat. She rushed to the door, pressing her ear against it. More voices, unfamiliar and harsh, barked orders in a language she didn't understand. The staff's fearful obedience was gone, replaced by chaos and terror. She tried the handle. Locked. Her pulse raced as she searched the room for anything she could use. A lamp, a heavy book, anything to defend herself. The window was too high, the drop too far. She was trapped. Suddenly, the door burst open. Dante stood in the threshold, his face grim, eyes burning with a wild intensity she hadn't seen before. "Stay behind me," he commanded, his voice a low growl. Before she could protest, masked men surged into the hallway, guns drawn. Dante moved with impossible speed, intercepting the first attacker with a blur of motion. Lila watched, frozen, as he disarmed the man with a single brutal twist, sending him crashing into the wall. Another lunged at Dante, but he caught the man's wrist, his grip inhumanly strong, and snapped it with a sickening crack. The attackers hesitated, fear flickering in their eyes. Dante's presence filled the corridor, his body tense, every muscle coiled. Lila saw his hands, fingers lengthening, nails sharpening into claws. His eyes glowed, golden and feral, and his teeth bared in a snarl that was no longer entirely human. A third man fired, the gun's report deafening in the narrow space. Dante moved faster than Lila could follow, the bullet missing him by inches. He lunged, and for a moment, Lila saw his true form. Taller, broader, his skin rippling as fur burst through his shirt, his face elongating into a wolf's muzzle. The transformation was both horrifying and mesmerizing, a violent ballet of bone and sinew. The attackers screamed, stumbling back, but Dante was relentless. He tore through them with savage efficiency, his movements a blur of claws and fangs. Blood spattered the walls, the air thick with the scent of fear and violence. Lila pressed herself against the far wall, terror and awe warring inside her. She had never seen anything like this, never imagined such power could exist. Yet even in the midst of the carnage, Dante's eyes found hers. For a heartbeat, the monster vanished, replaced by the man she'd met in the shadows. His gaze was gentle, pleading for her to understand. He fought not just to protect himself, but to shield her from the violence that had invaded their sanctuary. The last attacker tried to flee, but Dante was faster. He pinned the man to the ground, his claws at the man's throat. "Who sent you?" he demanded, his voice a guttural snarl. The man whimpered, shaking. "The council, they know about the girl. They said she's the key." Dante's eyes narrowed, and with a final warning growl, he released the man, who scrambled away, leaving a trail of blood behind him. The hallway was silent again, broken only by the ragged sound of Lila's breathing. Dante turned to her, his body still half changed, fur bristling along his arms, eyes glowing in the dim light. Lila shrank back, fear threatening to overwhelm her. But then he knelt, lowering himself to her level, his claws retracting, his features softening. "Lila," he said, his voice rough but unmistakably human. "I would never hurt you." She stared at him, her mind struggling to reconcile the monster with the man. "What are you?" she whispered. He looked away, shame flickering across his face. "A curse, a protector, both." He reached out, his hand trembling, and she flinched before forcing herself to hold still. Gently, he brushed a lock of hair from her face, his touch careful, almost reverent. "I'm sorry you had to see this, but I couldn't let them take you." Lila's terror ebbed, replaced by a strange, fierce awe. She saw the blood on his hands, the violence he was capable of, but also the restraint, the way he'd shielded her, the way he'd let the last man go. He was a monster, yes, but he was also something more, something heartbreakingly human. She swallowed hard, her voice barely a whisper. "You saved me." Dante nodded, his eyes searching hers for judgment, for fear. "I will always protect you, Lila, no matter what I become." The words hung between them, heavy with promise and pain. Lila's mind spun with questions. About the council, about the key, about her own place in this world of shadows and secrets. But for now, she let herself believe him, let herself trust the man behind the monster. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder. Dante stood, his body shifting back to its human form, though his eyes still glowed with that otherworldly light. "We have to move," he said, urgency returning to his voice. "It's not safe here anymore." He offered her his hand, and after a moment's hesitation, Lila took it. His grip was warm, steady, and impossibly strong. Together, they slipped through the blood-stained halls, the mansion's secrets pressing in on all sides. As they disappeared into the shadows, Lila knew nothing would ever be the same. She had seen the wolf within, and now she had to decide if she could trust him with her life, and maybe even her heart. But as the night deepened and the danger grew, one thing was certain: she was no longer running from monsters. She was running with one, and the world outside would never understand what she had just witnessed, or what she was becoming a part of. The mansion's corridors echoed with chaos, shouts, gunfire, the crash of splintering wood. Dante led Lila through a hidden door behind a tapestry, his hand gripping hers with urgent strength. The passage was narrow and dark, the air thick with dust and the scent of old secrets. Lila's heart pounded, but she forced herself to stay calm, her mind racing for solutions. "Where are we going?" she whispered, glancing back at the flicker of flashlight beams sweeping the hall behind them. "To the old wine cellars," Dante replied, his voice low but steady. "There's a way out through the tunnels, but we'll have to move fast." They hurried down a spiral staircase, the stone steps slick beneath their feet. Lila's breath came in sharp bursts, but she kept pace, refusing to slow him down. At the bottom, the cellar stretched before them, rows of ancient barrels, the air cool and damp. Dante paused, scanning the shadows. "They'll search everywhere," he muttered. "We need a distraction." Lila's eyes darted around, landing on a stack of empty bottles and a crate of old rags. "Give me your lighter," she said, surprising herself with the steadiness in her voice. Dante hesitated, then handed it over. Lila stuffed the rags into a bottle, doused them with wine, and lit the makeshift fuse. She hurled it toward the far end of the cellar, where it shattered in a burst of flame and smoke. Shouts erupted above as the fire alarm blared, drawing the attackers away from their path. Dante looked at her with new respect. "Quick thinking," she managed a shaky smile. "I grew up with brothers. You learn a few tricks." They slipped through a low archway, Dante leading the way with sure-footed confidence. The tunnel beyond was cramped and winding, the walls slick with moisture. Lila's nerves jangled, but she pressed on, matching his pace. As they moved, Dante's breathing grew heavier, his earlier wounds slowing him. Lila stopped, pulling him into a shadowed alcove. "Let me see," she insisted, examining the gash on his arm. She tore a strip from her shirt and wrapped it tightly, her hands surprisingly steady. He watched her, something softening in his eyes. "You're not what I expected." She met his gaze, her own guarded but honest. "Neither are you." For a moment, the danger faded, replaced by a fragile intimacy. Dante's voice dropped, rough with emotion. "I wasn't always like this. The wolf, the violence, it's a curse. My family was betrayed by someone we trusted. I lost everyone. Since then, I've been alone. Until tonight." Lila's heart twisted at the pain in his words. She reached for his hand, squeezing it gently. "You're not alone now." He looked at her, vulnerability flickering across his face. "I don't know if I can protect you. Not from all of this." She shook her head. "We protect each other. That's how we survive." A distant explosion rattled the tunnel, dust raining from the ceiling. The attackers were getting closer, their voices echoing through the stone. Dante tensed, his wolfish senses on high alert. "We have to keep moving," he said, urgency returning. "The exit's just ahead." They pressed on, the tunnel narrowing until they had to move single file. Lila led the way, her hands searching for the latch Dante described. She found it, a hidden lever disguised as a loose stone. She pulled, and a section of the wall slid open, revealing the night beyond. They emerged into the overgrown gardens behind the mansion, the air thick with the scent of wet earth and roses. The moon hung low, casting silver light over the chaos. Sirens wailed in the distance, and the mansion burned, flames licking at the sky. Dante turned to her, his face illuminated by firelight and moonlight both. "You saved us," he said, wonder in his voice. Lila shook her head, breathless but determined. "We saved each other." For a heartbeat, the world narrowed to just the two of them, danger all around, but trust growing between them, fragile and real. Dante reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her face, his touch gentle despite the blood on his hands. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice raw. Lila smiled, hope flickering in her chest even as fear lingered at the edges. "We're not out yet." "What now?" Dante glanced back at the burning mansion, his jaw set with resolve. "Now we run. Together." Hand in hand, they disappeared into the night, the world behind them in flames and the future uncertain. But for the first time, Lila felt a spark of something stronger than fear, something that might just be the beginning of trust, and maybe even love. And as the darkness closed in, she wondered if they would make it out alive, or if the secrets they carried would catch up to them before dawn. The gardens were a tangle of shadows and dew, the first hints of dawn painting the sky in bruised purples and golds. Lila and Dante moved quickly, keeping low as they skirted the burning mansion. The air was thick with smoke and the distant wail of sirens. But for a moment hope flickered. Maybe, just maybe, they'd made it out. They reached the edge of the estate, where a battered black SUV waited behind a crumbling stone wall. Marco, Dante's most trusted lieutenant, waved them over, his face drawn and anxious. "Hurry," he urged, glancing nervously at the horizon. "We don't have much time." Dante squeezed Lila's hand, his eyes searching hers. "Stay close. We're almost safe," she nodded, heart pounding, and climbed into the back seat. Marco slid behind the wheel, Dante beside him, and the SUV roared to life, tearing down a hidden track that wound through the woods. Lila watched the mansion recede in the rearview mirror, flames devouring the only home she'd ever known in this strange new world. But as the trees closed in, something felt wrong. Marco's hands were shaking on the wheel, his eyes darting to the rearview mirror too often. Dante noticed too, his body tensing, the wolf beneath his skin restless. "Marco," Dante said quietly, "where are you taking us?" Marco didn't answer. Instead, he pressed harder on the gas, the engine whining as the SUV sped up. Lila's unease grew, her fingers tightening on the seatbelt. Suddenly, the road forked. Marco veered left, away from the city lights, deeper into the forest. Dante's eyes narrowed. "This isn't the way to the safe house," Marco's jaw clenched. "I'm sorry, boss. I had no choice." Before Dante could react, the SUV screeched to a halt. Armed men emerged from the trees, their faces masked, guns trained on the car. Marco turned, guilt etched deep in his features. "They have my family. I had to give you up." Dante's fury was instant, his voice a low, lethal growl. "You betrayed us." "I'm sorry," Marco whispered, tears in his eyes. "I never wanted this." The doors were yanked open. Rough hands dragged Lila from the car, her screams muffled by a cloth pressed to her mouth. Dante fought like a man possessed, but the odds were overwhelming. They forced him to his knees, guns pressed to his head, as Lila was hauled away into the trees. "Dante!" she cried, terror slicing through her as she struggled against her captors. "Don't let them take me!" he roared, the sound inhuman, shaking the dawn air. His eyes blazed gold, his body straining against the men who held him. "Let her go!" he thundered, but they only laughed, dragging Lila farther away. She kicked and clawed, but the men were merciless. They bound her wrists and threw her to the ground, a circle of masked faces looming above her. One knelt, his voice cold. "You're worth more than you know, girl. The council wants you alive, but not unharmed." Lila's fear was suffocating, but she refused to beg. "You don't know what you're doing," she spat, her voice shaking. "Dante will come for me," the man smirked. "Let him try." Back at the car, Dante's rage boiled over. With a guttural snarl, he broke free, tossing his captors aside like rag dolls. His transformation was swift and terrifying, bones snapping, fur erupting, claws gleaming in the dawn light. The men fired, but bullets barely slowed him. He tore through them, a force of nature, his only thought to reach Lila. Marco cowered behind the car, tears streaming down his face. "I'm sorry, Dante. They said they'd kill my wife. My son." Dante paused, his wolfish face twisted with grief and fury. "You chose the wrong side, Marco," he growled, before bounding into the trees, following Lila's scent. Lila's captors dragged her to a clearing, tying her to a tree as the leader barked orders. "Keep her quiet. The boss will want to see her himself." She struggled, ropes biting into her skin, but she refused to cry. Instead, she listened, counting footsteps, memorizing voices, searching for any weakness. She remembered Dante's words, "We protect each other. That's how we survive." A gunshot rang out, followed by a scream. The men spun, weapons raised as Dante exploded into the clearing, a whirlwind of claws and fury. He moved with lethal precision, taking down 2 men before they could fire. The others scattered, but he was relentless, his rage unstoppable. Lila watched, helpless and awestruck, as Dante fought for her. His monstrous power was terrifying. But she saw the man beneath the beast. The desperation, the love, the promise he'd made to protect her at any cost. One of the men lunged at her, knife flashing. Lila twisted, kicking out with all her strength, buying herself a precious second. Dante was there in an instant, tearing the attacker away, his claws flashing in the dawn light. The last of the captors fled, disappearing into the trees. Dante knelt beside Lila, his hands shaking as he tore through the ropes. His face was bloodied, his eyes wild, but his touch was gentle. "Are you hurt?" he asked, voice raw. She shook her head, tears streaming down her cheeks. "You came for me. Always," he whispered, pulling her into his arms. For a moment, the world was just the 2 of them, her helplessness melting into his unstoppable fury, their trust forged in fire and blood. But as the sun rose, painting the sky with hope and warning, Lila knew the danger was far from over. They had survived the night, but the betrayal had changed everything. The council knew about her now. The pack was scattered, and Dante had been forced to choose her life over his family's safety. As they stumbled from the clearing, Lila clung to him, her heart pounding with fear and gratitude. She didn't know what the future held or if they would make it out alive. But she knew one thing. She would never doubt Dante's loyalty again. And somewhere in the shadows, unseen eyes watched, already plotting the next move in a game that was only just beginning. The sun was barely above the horizon, its pale light filtering through the trees as Dante and Lila moved through the forest, every sense sharpened by adrenaline and loss. The betrayal still burned in their veins, but there was no time to grieve. The council's men would regroup, and Marco's treachery had left them exposed. Dante's pack was scattered, their safe houses compromised, but Lila was alive, and that was all that mattered to him now. They reached the edge of a clearing where an old stone chapel stood, half swallowed by ivy and shadow. Dante paused, his nostrils flaring as he scented the air. "They're inside," he murmured, voice low and dangerous. "The council's lieutenant, the traitor. This is where they're holding the others." Lila's heart pounded. She could see movement through the broken stained glass, armed men, tense and alert. She touched Dante's arm, her voice steady despite the fear in her chest. "We do this together. I'm not hiding." He looked at her, torn between protectiveness and pride. "Stay close. If anything happens..." She cut him off with a fierce look. "We protect each other. That's the deal." A ghost of a smile flickered across his lips. You're impossible. She squeezed his hand, then slipped a small knife from her boot, the blade glinting in the morning light. Good. They won't expect me. Dante shifted, his body rippling with the promise of transformation, but he held it back for now. They crept to the chapel's side door, moving as one. Lila's mind raced, cataloging every detail, the guards' positions, the rhythm of their patrols, the way the traitor's voice carried through the cracked stone. Inside, the air was thick with incense and fear. The council's lieutenant, a tall man with cold eyes, stood at the altar, Marco kneeling before him, hands bound. The rest of the pack, those who'd survived the night, were huddled at the far end, guarded by men with guns. Dante's rage simmered, but Lila's hand on his arm kept him grounded. Wait for my signal, she whispered. She slipped through the shadows, moving silently behind the nearest guard. With a swift, practiced motion, she pressed the knife to his throat, her voice a deadly whisper. Drop the gun. He obeyed, eyes wide with shock. Dante moved then, a blur of motion, disarming another guard before the man could cry out. Chaos erupted. Shouts, gunfire, the crash of pews as the pack surged to their feet. The lieutenant drew a pistol, aiming at Marco. Enough! One more step and he dies. Dante froze, his body trembling with the effort to hold back the wolf. Lila stepped forward, her knife steady. Let him go. This is between you and us, the lieutenant sneered. You're nothing, girl. Just a pawn. Lila's eyes blazed. Maybe, but pawns can become queens. She lunged, catching him off guard. The pistol fired, the bullet grazing her side, but she didn't stop. She tackled the lieutenant, the two of them crashing to the floor. Dante roared, the sound shaking the chapel's rafters. He transformed in a heartbeat, fur and fangs and fury unleashed. The guards panicked, some fleeing, others firing wildly. Dante tore through them, his movements a blur of violence and grace. Lila fought with everything she had, her knife flashing, her body moving on instinct. She freed Marco, who joined the fray, his loyalty to Dante unbroken despite his betrayal. The lieutenant broke free, slamming Lila against the altar. Pain exploded in her side, but she gritted her teeth, refusing to give in. You don't know what you're dealing with, he hissed, pressing the gun to her chest. Dante saw, and something inside him snapped. He leapt, knocking the gun aside, his claws raking the lieutenant's arm. The man screamed, dropping the weapon. Lila seized the moment, driving her knife into his thigh. He collapsed, blood pooling on the stone. But the fight wasn't over. One last guard raised his gun, aiming at Dante's back. Lila threw herself in front of him, the bullet slamming into her shoulder. She crumpled, pain blinding her. Dante caught her before she hit the ground, his hands gentle despite the blood and claws. Lila, stay with me, she gasped, her vision swimming. Don't let them win. He pressed his forehead to hers, desperation in his eyes. I won't lose you. Not now, the lieutenant, bleeding and broken, laughed weakly. You can't save her. The curse, she's not one of you. Dante's eyes blazed gold. She is now. He bit his wrist, blood welling, and pressed it to Lila's lips. Drink, he commanded, his voice both plea and order. It's the only way. She hesitated, fear and trust warring inside her. But the pain was too much, the world slipping away. She drank, the taste of his blood wild and electric, burning through her veins like fire. The change was instant. Her body arched, every nerve alight. She felt Dante's power flood her, knitting her wounds, binding her to him in ways she couldn't yet understand. The pain faded, replaced by a fierce, exhilarating strength. Dante cradled her, relief and awe in his eyes. You're safe. You're mine. Lila looked up at him, her vision clearing. She felt different, stronger, sharper, as if the world had shifted beneath her feet. She could hear the pack's heartbeats, smell the blood and fear and hope in the air. The lieutenant tried to crawl away, but Lila rose, her movements fluid and sure. She stood over him, her eyes glowing with new power. It's over, she said, her voice ringing with authority. Dante joined her, his hand finding hers. Together they faced the traitor, the pack gathering behind them. Marco knelt, head bowed in shame. I'm sorry, he whispered. I thought I could save my family. Dante's expression softened. We all make choices. Some cost more than others. He turned to the pack. The council will come for us again. But we stand together. We fight for each other. Lila squeezed his hand, her heart pounding with new purpose. She wasn't just a survivor anymore. She was part of something bigger, bound to Dante, to the pack, to a future she'd never imagined. The chapel was silent, the chaos fading. The sun broke through the stained glass, painting them in gold and crimson. Lila looked at Dante, her voice steady. What now? He smiled, fierce and proud. Now we rebuild. Together. But as they left the ruined chapel, Lila felt the weight of what they'd done, the blood they'd spilled, the oath they'd made. She was changed, body and soul, her fate entwined with Dante's forever. And as the wind carried the scent of danger on the morning air, she knew the price of survival was only beginning to reveal itself. The council would not rest. The world would not understand. But for now, they had each other, and the strength to face whatever came next. Yet in the shadows beyond the chapel, unseen eyes watched, calculating, waiting for the next move. The game was far from over, and the blood oath they'd sworn would demand its due. The sun climbed higher, burning away the mist and blood of the night. The ruined chapel stood silent behind them, its shattered windows catching the morning light. Layla walked beside Dante, her body still humming with the strange new power that now pulsed in her veins. Every sound was sharper, every scent more vivid. She could feel the heartbeat of the forest, the wary hope of the pack as they regrouped in the clearing, and the steady, magnetic pull of Dante at her side. They found a quiet place beneath an ancient oak, away from the others. Lila sat on a mossy stone, her hands trembling as she tried to process everything. The betrayal, the battle, the way Dante's blood had changed her. She was alive, stronger than she'd ever been, but the world she'd known was gone. The city, her old life, the illusion of safety, all of it felt impossibly distant. Dante knelt before her, his eyes searching hers. "You saved us," he said softly. "You saved me." She shook her head, a bitter laugh escaping her lips. "I didn't have a choice. I couldn't let you die." He reached for her hand, his touch gentle. "You had every choice, Lila. You could have run. You could have let me go. But you stayed. You fought." She looked away, her heart aching with confusion. "What happens now? Am I like you?" He nodded, his expression solemn. "You're part of the pack. My blood runs in your veins. You're stronger, faster. You'll heal. But it's more than that." He hesitated, searching for the right words. "You're my mate, Lila. I've been searching for you for years. I didn't know your face, but I felt you. Every night, in every dream. When you walked into my house, I knew." Lila's breath caught. The word mate echoed in her mind, both terrifying and intoxicating. She remembered the way his eyes had found hers in the darkness, the way her heart had leapt at his touch. It was more than chemistry. It was destiny, written in blood and bone. But destiny was a heavy chain. She pulled her hand away, rising to pace beneath the tree. "I never asked for this. I just wanted to survive. I wanted to go home." Dante watched her, pain flickering in his eyes. "You still can. If you want to leave, I won't stop you. I'll make sure you're safe. But you need to know, if you go, you'll always be hunted. The council won't forget. And neither will I." She wrapped her arms around herself, torn between longing and fear. The city called to her, a life of normalcy, of anonymity. But it was a lie. She could never go back, not after what she'd seen, what she'd become. And then there was Dante, the man who had risked everything for her, who had bared his soul and his secrets. He stood, closing the distance between them. "I know it's not fair. I know I'm asking you to give up everything. But I can't pretend I don't want you to stay. Not just for the pack. For me." Lila looked up at him, her heart pounding. "Why me? Why not someone stronger? Someone who understands this world?" He smiled, a hint of sadness in his eyes. "Because you're brave. Because you see me. Not just the wolf, not just the boss. You see the man. And because fate doesn't care about what we want. It only cares about what we need." She laughed, the sound shaky but real. "You make it sound so simple." "It's not," he admitted. "It's dangerous. It's messy, but it's real." They stood in silence, the weight of choice pressing down on her. She thought of the life she'd left behind, the job, the friends, the quiet dreams of safety. She thought of the mansion, the secrets, the blood she'd spilled. And she thought of Dante, the way his presence steadied her, the way his touch made her feel alive. "I don't know if I can do this," she whispered. "I don't know if I'm strong enough." He cupped her face in his hands, his thumb brushing away a tear. "You're the strongest person I've ever known, but you don't have to decide now. Whatever you choose, I'll stand by you." She closed her eyes, letting herself lean into his touch. For a moment, the world faded. The danger, the uncertainty, the fear. All that remained was the warmth of his hands, the steady beat of his heart, the promise of something more. But the world intruded, as it always did. A shout from the clearing, the distant rumble of engines, reminders that safety was an illusion, that the fight was far from over. Lila stepped back, her decision still unmade. "I need time. I need to think," Dante nodded, understanding in his eyes. "Take all the time you need. I'll be here. I'm not going anywhere." She turned away, walking toward the edge of the woods, the sunlight dappling her path. Every step was heavy with uncertainty, but also with hope. She didn't know what the future held, whether she would choose love or freedom, safety or destiny. But for the first time, the choice was hers. Behind her, Dante watched, his heart in his eyes. He would wait for her, as he always had. And whatever she chose, their story was far from over. As Lila disappeared into the trees, the wind carried the scent of roses and rain, a promise and a warning. The world was dangerous, the risks real, but so was the pull between them, the bond that no force could break. And somewhere, in the shadows beyond the clearing, new threats gathered, watching, waiting for her decision. The next move was hers, and the game was only just beginning. The forest was alive with the hush of morning, sunlight filtering through the leaves in golden shards. Lila wandered the edge of the clearing, her mind a storm of questions and longing. Every step away from Dante felt like a test of her strength, her heart, her future. She could still feel the echo of his touch, the warmth of his promise. But the world beyond the trees was calling, full of unknown dangers and impossible choices. Behind her, the pack began to regroup, their voices low and wary. The threat of the council lingered, but for now, there was a fragile peace. Lila watched as Dante moved among his people, his presence commanding yet gentle, the wolf and the man in perfect balance. He glanced her way, hope and worry mingling in his eyes. She looked away, afraid of what he might see, afraid of what she might choose. But even as she tried to find clarity, the shadows around the clearing seemed to thicken. Unseen, a figure moved through the trees, silent as a ghost. He watched Lila with eyes like polished obsidian, his expression unreadable. He was tall, elegant, his suit immaculate despite the wildness of the woods. A silver ring gleamed on his finger, etched with a symbol Lila had seen only in her nightmares. He spoke softly, his voice a whisper that seemed to carry on the wind. "So the lost one has returned. The blood has awakened, at last." He watched as Lila paused, her hand pressed to her heart as if she sensed him. He smiled, cold and hungry. "You have no idea who you are, do you, little wolf? No idea what you're worth." From the shadows, another figure approached. A woman with hair like midnight and eyes sharp as knives. She bowed her head to the man, her voice trembling. "The council failed. The pack is scattered, but the girl survived. She's changed." The man's smile widened, cruel and knowing. "Of course she survived. She is her mother's daughter after all, and now she is mine." He turned, his gaze never leaving Lila. "Prepare the others. We move at dusk. I want her brought to me, alive. No mistakes this time," the woman hesitated. "And the wolf?" He waved a dismissive hand. "Kill him if you must. He's served his purpose. The girl is all that matters now." As the woman melted back into the trees, the man lingered, savoring the moment. He watched as Lila returned to the clearing, her face set with determination. He could see the struggle in her eyes, the war between love and fear, destiny and freedom. He relished it. The game was just beginning, and he held all the cards. Back in the clearing, Lila found Dante waiting for her. He reached for her hand, his touch grounding her in the present. "Whatever you decide, I'll stand by you," he promised, his voice steady. She squeezed his hand, her heart aching with the weight of her choice. "I want to believe that. I want to believe we can be safe." He brushed a strand of hair from her face, his eyes fierce. "We'll fight for it. Together." But even as he spoke, Lila felt the prickle of unseen eyes on her skin. She turned, scanning the trees, but saw nothing. Still, the sense of danger lingered, a shadow at the edge of her happiness. The mysterious man watched, his patience infinite. He whispered to the wind, a promise and a threat. "Run if you must, little wolf. Hide behind your lover's strength, but you cannot escape what you are. You cannot escape me." As the sun climbed higher, the pack began to move, preparing for whatever came next. Lila stood at the crossroads of her life, torn between the safety of the past and the wild, uncertain promise of the future. She knew the enemy was out there, watching, waiting. She knew the fight was far from over, but for now she had a choice. Love or freedom, trust or fear, destiny or escape. And as the shadows deepened, the enemy's vow echoed through the forest, chilling and certain. "You are mine, Lila. Sooner or later you will come to me. And when you do, there will be no turning back." The wind carried his words, a warning and a lure. Lila shivered, her heart pounding with dread and anticipation. She looked at Dante, searching his eyes for answers, for hope. Should she trust him, risk everything for love? Or should she run before it was too late? The story is only beginning. The enemy is awake. The hunt has started. What should Lila do? Should she trust Dante? Or run before it's too late? Comment below for part 2.